Hello everyone, how are you doing? Welcome to this webinar on behalf of TEFL Org. My name is Carl. I'll be with you for the next sort of 45 minutes talking about mixed ability classes in English as a foreign language. So if that's the kind of thing you're interested in or you want to know more about, then hopefully this webinar will be for you. It's a live webinar. I'm here currently in Northern Ireland. Do let me know where you are because all your comments come up on my screen. If you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, they all come up on my screen. So if you've got any questions about teaching mixed ability classes, or if you want to know something else about English as a foreign language, please do put it in the chat and we will get round to these questions. I will answer them live, or if not, Alan will answer in the chat by sending you a link or giving you a quick answer, whatever he might be able to do. I work as a teacher trainer. I work as an online examiner. I also work as an English teacher, face-to-face and online. I've been lucky enough to have lived and worked in many places around the world over the last 20 odd years, parts of Asia, parts of Europe, parts of the Middle East as well. So if you've got any questions about wanting to get into teaching English as a foreign language or even destination questions, please do put them in the chat and I will try my best to answer them. Or if not, I will point you in direction of a video that I've made, which does have the answer. People saying hello. Oh, John came online just to say that he's getting on the plane and won't be able to watch. Well, thanks, John, for letting us know that. Elizabeth's here. Hi, Elizabeth. Always good to see you. And in from Munich. Charles is in from Chicago. Raminder's in from London. Good to see many people tuning in today. Right, so teaching mixed ability classes. So what is a mixed ability class? So basically it's when you get a group of students and within that group of students, it can vary by level. So i.e. you could have an intermediate and a pre-intermediate students together. So you might go get a job online or you might go get a job at a school, a face-to-face school, and you walk into the classroom and they might say it's the boss might have told you it's an intermediate class, but when you get in there, you'll see that they're sort of pre-intermediate and intermediate. And it happens even when you're told it's one level, you get in there and you will find that the students aren't exactly that level. Some schools, and I'll talk about this on the next slide, actually on purpose mix them together. So you have pre-intermediate and intermediate. I'll talk about that in a second. But also within a level, you can have different abilities. So you might be told that you've got an intermediate general English class, for example, but you will find that you'll have strong intermediates and you'll have weak intermediate students because, you know, intermediate, whilst it is a level, it does sort of carry a lot of different abilities within it. Same with elementary, pre-intermediate, upper intermediate, advanced, beginner, whatever it might be. But you will find that even one intermediate student is not as good or as strong as another intermediate student. You also might find that you have different abilities in the 4 key skills: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. So yes, you might have an intermediate level, but you might find that some of the students are really good at speaking, whilst maybe not so good at, let's say, listening. And you might find that some are better at writing than they are at speaking. So you sort of have within the 4 skills, different levels as well, different abilities, as well. You also have different abilities in terms of experience and knowledge. So obviously, if you've got like an adult class, adult is any age from 18 up. So you might have some 20-year-olds in there and you might have some 65-year-olds in there. And within that, you'll find that they have different life experience, or also different experience of taking exams, maybe different experience of studying. That can make a difference to your classes. Also with knowledge, cultural knowledge, you might have people that have different abilities than others. They might know more, they might know less, they might have lots of knowledge in about one part of the world, but not about another part of the world. And this, whilst not totally key for learning English, can make a difference in terms of sort of how quickly they answer, how many ideas they have about the world. So again, this is something to just sort of bear in mind. Now with kids classes, you will find that hopefully any kids classes you get are a lot more closer in age. So some schools will sort of range, maybe let's say 9 to 11 years old, they'll group those together. Then from that 12 to 14, something like that, group them together. And hopefully you'll find that within that, there's sort of similar knowledge. And hopefully, again, you will have sort of strong kids in one class compared to others. So just something to be aware of. So why does it happen? So if you, English as a foreign language and teaching English as a foreign language is a bit of a business. And you will have online companies that, for example, employ people, and they will want to make as much money as they can. Now, if they're paying you, let's say they're paying you $15 an hour, they need to have enough students in the class to cover your wage and any outgoings that they have. And if they've, let's say that break-even point is 4 students and they want to get 5 in there. If they've got to like 3 or 4 and they're all of a similar level, these students, similar ability, but they need to find one more, they might find one that's almost at that level, almost at that ability, or one that's slightly below, and they get that student and put them in with you. And it's the same with face-to-face classes, which could go up to like 20. And schools do this because they have to make money, they have to pay your wages, and they want to make a profit as well. And so that's how sometimes they can't get, if in an ideal world, they get 20 students of the same ability, but maybe if they only get 13 or 14, they need to fill like another 6 spaces. They might get people that are higher, push them down into a lower level class. They might get people that are lower, push them up to a higher level class. So schools sometimes do it. These are sort of private language schools, which is a big chunk of the work out there. If you're going to work in a state school or like a public school or a school that's owned by a government, that might be slightly different because it's not running for a profit. But again, they have to have maybe certain numbers to sort of fill their quota. So again, they might just do this as well. Also, some classes are not very popular. So if you, for example, I've done classes that are quite specific. So I've done classes where I only gave lessons about teaching presentation skills. It's quite niche, and it only had like 5 or 6 students that signed up for it. They paid quite a bit of money to go into this, but because there's only 5 or 6 of them, the school that I worked for took them all in at different levels. And, you know, some gave good presentations, some gave bad presentations. But if a class that you're teaching is a bit niche and is not particularly popular, not going to have lots of people sign up for, then the school will sort of push quite a few people, push as many people as they can into it, which can really affect the levels. If you go and work for a business, they can sort of lump all students together. If you're going to go do some business English classes, or if a business goes to your language school and says, I want you to all come and teach our whole company, which might be 20, 30 people, for example, they might not be level tested. And if that happens, they're all lumped together. You're going to have a mixed range within that. So hopefully all schools should level test. I've talked a bit about level testing in other webinars, but sometimes this level testing can be done very quickly. Sometimes this level testing can only be something like a grammar test. So it doesn't test their speaking, their listening, or their reading maybe, or even their writing to a certain extent. Sometimes schools don't level test us at all. And that can mean that if a student comes up and goes, well, I'm intermediate, they get put into the intermediate class. They then get a class with Carl, and all of a sudden Carl's like, well, actually that student's pre-intermediate, or that student's upper intermediate. You can also have students that are sort of drift up the levels within a school, doing the bare minimum to pass. So they go in, maybe, let's say elementary level, they just pass the exam at the end of the course to get onto pre-intermediate level. Then they just pass the exam to get through pre-intermediate level. Whereas you'll have some that have sort of working really hard and get a really high grade at pre-intermediate level. So they sort of just drift up doing the bare minimum, and eventually that sort of catches up with them, and they can be quite low levels compared to some of the other students in the classes. And also you will get schools passing students when they shouldn't. This happens quite a bit sometimes with universities, that they want to take the money from the students, and in order for them to pass, they need to get through their exams. You might think they're not ready, but someone else makes the decision, well, actually, we need their money, so we're going to pass them anyway. So schools passing students when they shouldn't, and it happens in language schools as well, can also happen if, you know, the student's parent is quite influential, for example. The student might get passed when they really shouldn't be. Thank you for everyone that's tuning in. Good to see. Hello. Hi, Chris. Hi, everyone else. Please do get any questions you have in, or if you've got any experience of this, please do put the questions in the comments section. They will come up on my screen. Right. So what are the challenges of doing this? So I think the biggest challenge is keeping everyone engaged. If you've got a wide range of, well, not wide range, but if you've got a range of abilities in the class, keeping the strong ones engaged in the materials and happy in the materials, and keeping the weaker ones can be quite tricky. And I'll talk a bit about how to do this in this, how to sort of fix this as a, you know, how to do this in a second. Addressing all students at both ends of the ability. So if you've got a class and you've got some pre-intermediate and you've got some that are pushing upper intermediate, keeping them all happy can be quite tricky. And managing the dynamics within the classroom and also the morale. You will get, if you've got mixed ability classes, you will get some students that complain and are not happy to be in a mixed ability class, especially if they are perceived as, if they see themselves as stronger than the other students. You might also get them saying, well, actually, I don't want to be paired up with someone weaker. I don't want to be paired up with someone that's strong. And keeping this sort of challenge and you know, fixing this can be quite difficult. Keeping everyone motivated sort of goes along with being engaged. But if they do something quite quickly, if they finish the task quite quickly, they might not want to come to the next class unless they feel like they're actually learning. Also, if you pitch the lesson too high, the weaker ones might struggle and think it's too hard and won't be motivated. Planning can take a lot longer because, as you'll tell you in a bit, you do have to plan a bit more for mixed ability classes. Right, so things to introduce into a mixed ability class if this is the sort of thing you have. So a bit of peer learning and a bit of peer teaching. So what do I mean by that is if you can get the stronger ones helping the weaker ones, one of the best ways to learn is to teach. And so that's the best thing. Two, it sort of takes the pressure off you a little bit because you don't have to sort of be almost teaching two different classes. And also you might find that some of the stronger ones like being helped, like helping the weaker ones. You might find that some of the weaker ones learn a bit more quickly because they're being pushed by someone that's a bit stronger. So if you can get this sort of thing going in the classroom, it does help. It can be tricky. You know, you don't, especially in sort of countries where there's a bit of a hierarchy, if a boss within a class is being taught by one of his stronger English speaking underlings, that's not maybe going to work so well. So you've got to be a bit careful of hierarchy. It can also be a bit of a problem with age as well. Try and get in some stronger error correction for some. So for the stronger ones, within the class, the ones that are at the higher level of the ability, you might find that you error correct them a bit more than the weak ones. So, you know, even if you're sort of doing an activity on, let's say, the present continuous, and you think that all you want to do is error correct the present continuous, if you've got some stronger ones and they're throwing in some other things and they're not doing it very well, you might want to error correct them all a bit more. Whereas the weaker ones, you might want to just stick to the present continuous, you know, push the stronger ones a bit more and show them that they are making actually more errors than they think they are. Same with writing. You might, when you error correct their writing, you might go into a lot more detail on the stronger ones than you might do on the weaker ones, because for the weaker ones, you just want them to improve. Whereas the stronger ones, you obviously want them to improve, but you want to improve specific things as well on top of what you're teaching. You might have different levels of texts. So you might have sort of text on a similar theme. You might even have the same text, whereas with the weaker ones, you take out a couple of the paragraphs, or with the stronger ones, you add in a couple of paragraphs, change the length, that kind of thing. Maybe change a bit of the vocabulary. AI can help you with that. More diagnostic tests of students. So if you feel that you've got mixed ability classes, if you test them all a bit more, not necessarily informal tests, but you can do it with informally. And I've done lots of webinars where I talk about testing. You might try and get more of the problems that the stronger ones are making and try and fix some of those. So if they've got more problems with pronunciation, you might do some more diagnostic tests on pronunciation and throw in some more pronunciation activities for the stronger ones, for example. And a wider range of activities. So a bit more, I'm going to talk about that in a second. But if you sort of have similar type of activities all the time, and if you find that the stronger ones get used to this type of activity and they're doing pretty well with it, if you can vary the activities and you keep the stronger ones a bit on their toes, you get them to work their brain in different ways, keeps them a bit more motivated, keeps them all a bit more engaged because they're not really sure what's going to happen in the classroom today. Right, so you've got differentiation. So this means sort of doing different things within the classroom, within the group of students. So you can have same theme but varied activities. So you might find that you do sort of reading on the same theme, but you might give the stronger ones a different activity to do with the reading text than you do with the weaker ones. And or you give them sort of more questions to answer on it, or you give them different types of activities in terms of looking at micro skills within reading or listening. This kind of thing can help to keep the stronger ones motivated and working hard, and it might also keep the weaker ones from feeling like they can't keep up with the stronger ones. Tiered tasks. So again, you could have different types of questions that are seen as more tricky than weaker ones. So for example, if you got a true or false set of questions for overall for the class, you might throw in a couple of true, false, not given tasks in for the stronger ones. This can be sort of tiered tasks and make things a bit more difficult or a bit more easy. AI can help you with this for sure. It can help you give you some examples of, if you give it a text, it can give you, make 10 questions that are seen as quite easy, make 10 questions that are seen as quite difficult. I think it could help with that. More open-ended activities. So, activities where there isn't just one answer, sort of activities where they have to write something or create something, which can allow the stronger ones to show more their abilities. And then it can, the weaker ones can just sort of do what they need to do to complete the task, whereas the stronger ones have a lot more options because they're stronger and they can show their ability. Have different levels of instructions. So you could have, when you give a task out, instead of speaking the instructions, maybe you could hand out a piece of paper with the instructions on. And, for the weaker ones, they've got a lot more sort of help in terms of the instructions, whereas the stronger ones have less help, and then they've got to think about it a bit more. Flexible groupings can help as well. So one thing to do, a bit like the peer teaching, is to pair the strong ones with the weak ones. That's definitely something that you can do. With all of these that I'm going to talk about now on this slide, you've got to be a bit careful in that the strong ones might not want to work with the weak ones. They might feel like it's a waste of their time. The weak ones might not want to work with that. But pairing them, trying to get them a peer teaching, trying to get them through can help. Or you compare the levels together. So you have all the sort of weaker ones over there, the stronger ones over there. Hopefully then the stronger ones can talk in English a bit better, or, keep themselves a bit more motivated. But I think the key thing with mixed ability classes is definitely to rotate often. Keeping strong with weak all the time will eventually annoy the strong ones or annoy the weak ones. And especially if you keep the same two people together all the time, you've got to sometimes put Carl with Elizabeth, then the next week put Carl with Anne, then put Charles with Elizabeth. Rotate them a lot, and they can get a bit from each of them. And they might find, that they learn something from one of the others. They might find that they can get on better with one of the others. So rotating often, I think, is a big part of mixed ability classes. You can group via skills. So if you really know your students and you know that some are stronger at writing than others, You can have groups where the weaker writers are together and the stronger writers are together, and they're working together, they're pushing each other, or they're helping each other at whatever that level. You can group that, but that does mean you need to know your students quite well. You can also do lots of group activities and make sure that everyone participates. So you could have a, let's say, an activity where they have to write something, and you just want them to produce one piece of writing between all of them. You could, have the weaker ones writing it and the stronger ones helping them by telling them what to write. That way, the weaker ones are actually doing something. They're not just sitting there letting the stronger ones do it. So you've got to, have little groups where you can control who's doing the writing and who's doing the speaking and that kind of thing. I'll talk a bit more about activities on the next slide. On a slide in a bit. Please, any questions you do have, do put them in there. Really good to hear any. Right, so a bit of scaffolding can definitely help, especially with the weaker levels. So what is scaffolding? Is basically you're giving them steps to get to where they want to be. And that is obviously teaching, but within an activity, you can give them more scaffolding. So you could give weaker students more sentence frames. So, you could give them the same activity, let's say a writing activity, and you then give the weaker ones like sentences with some missing words, or you might give them some sort of verbs that they have to write the sentence from. You give them ideas to help them, whereas the stronger ones, you're not giving them any sort of help at all. That means the weaker ones will be able to produce their writing more quickly, more easily, and the stronger ones maybe have to think about it a bit more. Visual aids, you're doing a reading text or you're doing a listening text. You could give the weaker ones a picture of what you're talking about, and the stronger ones might be like, I've got to think about it a bit more. I'm not quite sure what the topic of this is. Whereas the weaker ones are, I know because I've got this picture. Now, you do have to be a bit careful with this, that you're not seen as favoring one side more than the others. If this is going to, what you want to sort of show them is that this is not going to how it's going to be on an exam or a test. This is just to help the students get through the classes or get through the activities. You can give them pre-taught vocabulary, more of it to the weaker ones than the stronger ones. Pre-teaching is a good thing generally, but not every single time do you need to pre-teach, because in the real world you don't really get pre-taught vocabulary before you read something. So you might find that on a listening you give some students the pre-taught vocabulary, on others you don't. Choice and autonomy. So you can give them different task options depending on the skill. So you could do a text, do reading activities around the text. And then you could say to them, right, you've now got a choice. You can either do this writing activity or you can do this speaking activity. Or you could say, okay, we've got a choice of 2 different speaking activities. Which one do you feel like you want to do? And then the stronger ones hopefully will choose something that will push them a bit more. If they feel like their writing isn't very good, they might choose a writing activity. You might even say to them, right, okay, I've given out this piece of paper. You guys are doing a writing activity because you feel that those ones you've given out have weak writing. I've given out this paper and you guys are doing a speaking activity because you feel like they are weaker at speaking. Different kinds of projects on different kinds of themes. You could, some teachers like to do sort of a bank of work over the whole of a term. You could sort of say, right, okay, you can do this, or you can do this week for your project, having a little think of different activities. Self-access learning. So you could give homework out, or you could say, right, you've got to study this, and it could be varied different levels depending on how good they are or how weak they are. Gamification using leaderboards. So you could do, and I'll talk a bit about some technology in a minute you could use, but you could have quizzes, that kind of thing, where the stronger ones are getting points, and well, everybody's getting points, but the stronger ones are probably going to get more points, and then have a bit of competition between the stronger ones. You've got to be a bit careful in that the weaker ones don't get too demotivated by this, but getting in a bit of competition can help the strong ones to compete a bit with each other. And also different homework options. So I think it's okay to say, right, this you're going to have, because you're a bit stronger, you guys are going to have to write 200 words instead of 100 words, for example. Having different homework options can work. So using technology and different materials. So you could say to use or not use dictionaries. You could say, right, you guys can't use your dictionaries, you guys can use your dictionaries. You can say this, or you could even say, right, you guys, this week we're not going to use dictionaries. This week we are going to use dictionaries, keeping them on their toes, keeping them working a bit about it. You can, go on certain websites or certain applications, and they can do quizzes on that. They can also, you can create some activities that are strong, that are harder or weaker for others. Graded readers are pretty good. I know, for example, in my daughter's primary school, they have different levels of reading tasks for the different students within that. And I think if you can get hold of some graded readers, that can really, really help to push the stronger ones and to help the weaker ones. Worth a Google graded readers. You could watch YouTube with the subtitles or without the subtitles. You could, it is quite tricky, because obviously if you're going to put it on a big screen at the back, then you've got to decide, you can't really have one screen where they don't have the subtitles, one where they do, because they will just all look at the subtitles. But, if you've got something like computers in your room, you could do that. Or you could even just sort of try and trust them and say, right, look, this is your listening activity, try and not use it without the subtitles, or if it's too difficult for you, use it with the subtitles. Or you could even play it once without the subtitles, and the stronger ones are doing okay, and then you play it again a second time with the subtitles, and that will then help the weaker ones. Right, some of the practical classroom activities you can do. So jigsaw readings. So that is where they have to answer questions, but they don't have the whole text. So you split a text up within 5 different students, for example, and then they've all got to work together to try and answer the questions. And you could give the stronger ones longer paragraphs, or you could make the weaker ones have easier vocabulary, that kind of thing. That way, that sort of thing, they don't necessarily need to know that they've got a weaker or a harder one. Running dictations can help. So that is where they have to, you give them some questions and the answers are around the room. They have to stand up and go to certain ones. You can, that way you can have harder texts or harder answers over there, or you could take it in turns and you give a harder question to the stronger ones, for example, that kind of thing. Information gap activities. So this is where everybody has some answers, or everybody has some information, and they have to walk around the room and try and ask each other questions. And you might find that you give longer text to one than the other. You can have role plays with more advanced roles. Again, this is something where you don't necessarily need to tell them that you're doing it by ability. But if you're doing some sort of role play and you need someone that needs to speak a lot, or you need someone that has to ask lots of questions, or they have to do something that's quite difficult, you could give that to the stronger ones. Assessment and feedback. And I can see some questions coming in. Please do keep them coming. I've got a couple more slides only. Assessment and feedback. So lots and lots of checks you can do with mixed ability classes, and you can show all of them what they need to work on and what they don't need to work on. I think it can sometimes be seen by the stronger ability students that they are really good at English, when actually, yes, they are better than the other people in the class, but they're not perfect by any means, and they've still got quite a way to go. Doing lots of checks where you keep sort of showing them that they still need to improve on this, but they've done this well, done this badly, that sort of thing can help. Focusing more on the individual than the class within assessment and feedback with mixed ability classes can be really helpful. If you do lots of class feedback, it's not really true, because there's such a range of abilities. So lots of individual progress, and try not to compare them against others, just showing, okay, look, you've improved this really well, you still need to work on this. That can really help. Doing some peer and self-assessments can help. So, you could have stronger ones help the weaker ones to improve an essay, to improve their grammar. This kind of thing can help. not do it for them, but work together. And also sort of self-assessment where they're being truthful to themselves. Having individual criteria for success. So, don't think that the whole class needs to do this in order for the whole class to pass. Doing sort of individual criteria by saying, okay, you need to improve this from this to this. Okay, well done. You've done that. You've passed. Depends on your school how it works with that, but having sort of individual criteria to, just to show that they are improving and successful. Right, some final tips. Don't be surprised by walking into or finding that you have a mixed ability online class or face-to-face class. It happens. And as I've shown, there are lots of different mixed ability, lots of different ways of classing mixed ability. You will at some point have mixed ability classes. Plan a bit for diversity. So even from the start, and especially with, I'd say, kids classes where you have stronger ones who just think that the best way to improve their English is to finish something very, very quickly. Have extra activities that you might need in the first few weeks. Okay. You've got to be a bit flexible. Don't just stick necessarily to your lesson plan. If you've got a stronger student that wants to go off and talk to you a little bit about something, try and give that stronger student a bit of time to sort of get it off their chest, to have a good speak with you, get around all of the students and try and be a bit flexible in terms of the different types of activities. If you're always doing the same similar types of activities, because it works quite well, eventually they will get a bit bored and you need to sort of vary it to help the different abilities in the skill levels. Use your people skills. So you're going to have students that aren't happy to be in a mixed ability class at both ends. Show them how they are improving, explain to them that they will still learn. Now, you might find that they then go to your boss and say, I don't want to be in that class anymore. Don't take that personally. It's just them feeling that they need to be in a different class to improve. They might be right, they might not be wrong. And you kind of got to then sort of let your boss deal with it. The boss might come to you and say, Carl, do you think they should move? But use your people skills, try and keep them in your class for as long as you can. Don't promise them anything. Don't promise, I'll put you in a level above, because while they're good ability in your class, they might not be quite at the level above. Okay. Stay positive with them. Don't go, oh, it's so difficult to teach these mixed ability classes. Yes, it might be, but stay positive. Show how you're improving them all. Can be very difficult, but you've really got to end up doing this. Also, don't spend more time with one individual or ignore others. It can be quite tricky to not spend a lot of time with the weaker ones, because that the stronger ones already understand it. The stronger ones are going to get annoyed about that. So, you have to get around all the students. And if it's a weaker one and that weakest one is really, really struggling, see if you can then just say to a stronger one who is willing to do it and who is being quite helpful in the classroom, look, Genevieve, can you just come over and talk to Carl about this? Try to help Carl through this. Really important that you don't concentrate too much on the weaker ones, or you sort of overcompensate and just try and get the stronger ones through. You've really got to get around all of them. Thank you very much. Right, let's get to some of these questions. Please, any questions you do have, do put them in the chat, whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or LinkedIn. They come up on my screen. If you agreed with this, if you disagreed with this, if you've got any experience of this, especially with teachers sort of online or kids classes, please do put that in the chat as well. Hi, Genevieve. Thanks for sharing with us. And how far do you communicate the split? Students opening class and to understand the way behind these techniques and not get frustrated. Right. So at the start, they will probably all go into the class thinking that they're of a similar level, because they might have done a level test, or they might have all passed an exam, but obviously some people can get a really high mark in a test. Some people can just barely pass a test. So when students start within a class, they tend to think that they are of a similar level. You will find that as long as you are spending time with them all equally, you will find that as the class goes on, they sort of realize that they are a bit weaker than others, or that some are stronger than others. You will get comments like, oh, Genevieve has such good English. I want to speak like Genevieve does. You will get those sort of comments. And obviously the things, when the first time you meet them, you might not know that they're stronger or they're weaker. So you don't really know who's the strongest one, who the weakest ones are. But, as you go on, go through the things, you don't necessarily need to say, look, Genevieve, you are stronger than Carl, but if you sort of just give a couple of different, just if you see someone finish quite quickly, you just slip them another little activity. So why don't you try this? Or, doing things like giving them the choice of activities. You're not sort of explicitly saying that people are different. What you're saying is, here, why not decide yourself which activity you want to do? And just sort of get them to deal with it themselves. And I think that's another point of rotating the students often, not always pairing the strong ones all together or the weak ones all together, or not always pairing strong and weak. If you rotate them often, you will find that they don't maybe sometimes know what you're doing with the rotations, or they will also then eventually realize that Genevieve is stronger than Carl. And that's why the teacher is maybe doing something different with Genevieve than they are with Carl. So these sort of things can really make a difference. Okay. I hope that answered your question, Genevieve. Another question there, how common is it? It's not super common. It does depend a bit on how your school operates. If you're going to go work at quite a big school with lots of teachers, you'll probably find that the levels, because there's a lot more students, that there are less mixed ability classes. If you go in to teach something like an exam English class, you will find that the students have different targets. So you might find that students, let's say they're doing an IELTS exam, you might find that some need to get 7, whereas some only need to get 5.5. And they've all signed up because they want to get their IELTS grade. But because some only need 5.5 and some need 7, that's quite a big difference. Your sort of job then is to sort of teach the fundamentals of the exam, different question types, sort of almost exam management classes instead of language. And, you can then sort of get into it a bit more in terms of feedback of their writing or their speaking. So it's common. And as I said, within a well-level tested class, you can have different abilities, but it does happen. So, don't be aware, speak to your boss about it. If you really feel that someone is much, 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 much stronger and is definitely not in that class, don't speak to them. Shouldn't be in that class. Don't speak to the student, although the student will probably say something to you first. Don't speak to the student. Go to your boss and say, look, I've got Chris. Chris, I think should be in an upper intermediate class. And can we move him up? And see what your boss says. Your boss might say, can I see a sample of their writing? The boss might say, let me look at their level testing scores and see, how it goes from there. Don't go promising any students that you want to change. Thank you, everyone. I think that's the end of the questions that have come in. Only a couple that's come in today, but they are quite useful. If you are watching this not live, please do still put in your questions. We come back here at the TEFL Org and we do watch the videos again. We do get around to answering all the questions. So please do give us a comment if you agree or disagree. If you're not watching this live, we've done lots and lots of these webinars on a range of topics. So if you did find this interesting, why not have a look at some of the other ones we have done? Thank you very much, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. We've got lots more information on our website, TEFL.org. We've also got Facebook groups. You can contact us via email. You can send us a message through Facebook. Look at us on LinkedIn. We've got lots of stuff on there as well. I hope you found it useful. Have a good morning. Have a good afternoon. Have a good evening, wherever you are. Bye-bye.